We're stepping back in time a bit today because my guest, Sheldon Larry, became a father over 30 years ago at a time where there were no gestational carriers and you couldn't find egg donors. You had to go the route of traditional surrogacy, and as a gay man, it wasn't always easy to find a surrogate willing to carry a child for you. It is a beautiful story of passion and love and courage and decision making, and I'm so excited to be able to share his story with you today. Welcome to the Becoming Baby Ready podcast, your podcast for queer family planning. My name is Sam, and throughout this podcast, you'll hear me have conversations with professionals who work alongside people who want to start and grow their families, as well as parents of intentionally created families. Everyone I speak to identifies as being part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. This is your opportunity to learn answers to questions you didn't even know you had. Welcome, everyone. I'm really excited today to be speaking with Sheldon Larry. Welcome, Sheldon. I'm really happy that you're here. I'm really very grateful that your cousin linked us together so that we could have this conversation. Please tell everyone who you are and about the members of your family and all the things.
Okay. My name is Sheldon Larry. I'm expat Canadian, I guess. I grew up in Toronto, and really all of my family population lives in and around the Toronto area. I left Toronto when I was 18. I went to college when I was 15, graduated when I was 18. I left and moved to London, England. Um, I went for a number of reasons. I'm a director and filmmaker, and at that time I wanted to um, kind of see if I could get into British broadcasting, get some sort of training in film and television. I subsequently worked for the BBC in London for 10 years, um, and then took that. And also, I have to say, getting out of Canada, I wasn't out, obviously, as a young teenager many years ago. And so moving to London created a sort of safe, distant place where I could figure out who I was, define my sexuality, and then come out to my family, which I did about maybe 5 years into that 10. Um, and then from London, I won a National Endowment Award and moved to New York City, where I lived for 10 years directing theater and won a couple of awards and began kind of because I'd spent 10 years in television, then kind of connected to Hollywood and the film industry here, and then moved to LA. And sort of around the time, I mean, I was extremely lucky professionally. I was quite successful quite quickly and had a lovely career and a relationship and was traveling a lot for work and flying all over the world and enjoying success, enjoying some material success. And then also began to think about, all right, at 33, 34, 35, this life is really wonderful, and but I don't want it to kind of not stop, but be in any way be limited by the success. I saw what my life was, and I wanted to keep exploring and growing and expanding out. I'd come from a very solid family, Jewish, good values, continuity. Parents had a good relationship. I had a great relationship with a brother, and began to think about how I could continue to expand my life. And parenting became something that I began to think more and more focused with. I was at that time in a 8-year relationship and thought about parenting with my partner. And then sort of embarked on the journey that has led me today to having 33-year-old twins and about to be 1-year-old grandchild. So I don't know. I can keep talking on this, or you can step in and whatever.
Well, I want to just acknowledge because, while this show is sharing people's stories of family creation, it is so accessible by comparison to when you were embarking upon your journey? Because if your children are now 33, I'm going to say that it was a minimum of 35 years ago that you started kind of rolling this around in your head. And then you
Mhm.
have to decide, how am I going to do this? I mean, you were in the US at the time. And really, Canada, I don't think at the time was probably any different when you're looking at things like adoption. That was going to be out full stop because you weren't in a cisgendered heterosexual relationship and you weren't legally married to someone. And I think at that time, those were requirements when it came
Mhm.
to adoption. So then, what are your options when you start thinking about family creation? Because surrogacy wasn't a word that people tossed around easily in those days.
No, I mean California, it was legal in California. Where there were a number of states where it wasn't legal, but
Okay.
actually in California, surrogacy was legal, and because of that, I began considering the idea of surrogacy and began to sort of do some exploration. And there's a group that still exists right now called Center for Surrogate Parenting that I'm not sure there was no internet then, so I couldn't have found it on the internet, but I don't remember how I got to it. But made an appointment, went and met with the head of the company. Um, he was intrigued and supportive, but not terribly optimistic. He wasn't pessimistic, but just thought, well, we've never done anything like this. But we did connect on a number of different areas. I mean, just personally, and he
Hmm.
began, and as I sort of formulated my interest, and at that time our interest in possibly expanding, one's family, he agreed to sort of limited support. And this is, I mean, it was actually so probably been 36 or almost 37 years ago because it was about a 3.5 year process until my
Okay.
daughters were born. Um, he at that time, most surrogates, the women who were parenting childless couples, were many of them were single women from religious families who wanted to bless a childless couple with a possibility of having a child. The
Hmm.
idea of being a surrogate parent for a gay couple or anyone gay the was felt to be more stranger, more alien, and particularly a lot of them were religious and were motivated. They felt there would be a number of objections. So the idea initially of even finding a woman, I mean, they had a lot of women on their books, but were not really optimistic, and so said, "Well, we'll support you, and you can use our framework." But we'd encourage you to try to go out and look for your own surrogate. So
Right.
um, I did that. I placed ads in small town papers in various states in the U.S. and declared what I was looking for. And there was a bit of a feedback, and we did meet a couple of people in that first year, but no one kind of came forward and that was obviously going to do it. And but I was building the relationship with the people at the center, and they became more committed and more interested, and they began helping and beginning to steer people our way. But again, I know they encountered a lot of resistance, and there
Hmm.
wasn't a lot of option or choice even in terms of surrogates. I did work with three surrogates. Um, Two fell to the ground and didn't work out. But we did I did actually do um, monthly inseminations. One was about a 6 month period, and the other was I think about a 4 month period. There was time between each of them, and it was the cycle of what one went through. It was you waited for the day, you jerked off in a cup, they did the insemination, and then you waited. And the first woman was sort of more wanted to be courted than she seemed to wanting to be
Hmm.
a parent. But I felt I didn't have a lot of choice. We didn't have a lot of choice, and so we would meet. I would take her to lunch. We would do the insemination. I would kind of hang out for a while. She was married, but this was an extracurricular activity for her. But it never happened, and then ultimately, I guess she got tired of dating me, and that was the end of that. The second, then the center came up with another person. There was a number of months between it, who was a woman who had been married, had had children, decided she was gay, came out and was with a female partner, and they thought, oh, gay man, gay woman, here's maybe a better idea.
Hmm.
Um, and we tried that for a few months, and she ultimately both withdrew from my situation and actually withdrew from her partnership. And at the end and that was about, the initial search and then those two situations. It was about 2 years,
Wow.
had gone by, and you go through this kind of boom of, oh, we're going to the day of insemination. Oh, you do it, and then you wait the 2 weeks, and oh, it hasn't worked, and so then you're gonna do it again, and then
Right.
you're up for the next 2 weeks. And so I felt like maybe this just isn't meant to be, and this just isn't going to happen. And the emotional roller coaster that I was on through that was
For
was
sure.
was difficult. I mean, anybody who's trying to conceive goes through this journey,
Yeah.
but I didn't have the other kind of tethers of support, solidity. I also had said nothing to my own family about it. I just thought, why am I going to tell them about this at this point? If and when we get pregnant, I'll announce we're having a baby. As you do, you wait to
Right.
see if there's a viable pregnancy. Anyway, a number of months went by, and then they called me and said they had another person to introduce me to. She was a woman who had a successful marriage, had two children of her own, had actually um, been a surrogate for two other people, and she was a lovely woman and had and found her way to being a surrogate because she had been childless and they thought to be unsuccessfully so for the rest of her life. And then eventually she did get pregnant with her own kids. And
Right.
so I think she understood the challenges for and as I say, stakes for somebody who was looking to do it. And
Hmm.
she also, I remember her saying also, she really relished the idea of parenting for someone gay because she wanted her own kids to know the complexity of humanity and the idea that she would actually parent for someone who was gay um, made it more of an experience. So we proceeded. She lived in Northern Cal and still does, lives in Northern California. I was living in Los Angeles. And the first couple of times we would kind of counter to counter the specimen
Mm.
from, so I would jerk off in a cup.
Yeah.
But they at that time used something called egg yolk buffer, which was something to um, kind of promote the lifespan and viability of the specimen. And I would drive it to Burbank Airport and go to the counter and put it on a plane, and she would then pick it up, in San Francisco. And I remember my favorite story of that is when I went to one month when I went to the counter, the agent who was checking me in said, "Well, what is this?" And I said, "Oh, it's genetic content," which is what I've been told to. So she said, "Genetic content?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Oh, you mean like butterflies?" And I said, "Yes, exactly, like butterflies." So we shipped that specimen off. She didn't get pregnant off that one, but then we decided to bring her to Los Angeles, and we did, and the first insemination we did when she was here, she actually did conceive and got pregnant.
Nice.
So
Now,
we were on our way.
can I ask a question here? Because you're talking about this woman being inseminated regularly. In current times, the overwhelming majority of people who are using a surrogate are using a gestational carrier. They have found an egg donor that matches their criteria. They have the eggs harvested, they have the eggs fertilized, frozen, and then we do a transfer with someone who's genetically not connected to any part of the process.
Mhm.
But you're talking about someone who is physically being inseminated with your semen as you've offered it, fairly fresh.
Mhm.
I mean, egg yolk,
Right,
aside,
right, right.
but Now that sounds like it's more traditional surrogacy where someone is using their own egg and carrying the pregnancy on your behalf. Was there not an option for
No,
gestational
no,
carriers at the
no,
time?
there wasn't. It was very, very, very new. This is, as I say, going back 35 years.
Right.
And so the that kind of complexity wasn't really even to be considered. I mean, at that time, everybody was doing insemination, and the carrier was also the to be the biological parent. So I was picking, and had a woman who was going to be biologically related to my children.
Hmm.
There was also, it's getting ahead of the story, but because she was biologically related to my children, even in the laws in California, which tolerated or supported the idea of surrogacy, and also interesting how things changed, because she was the mother. We had to, when my daughters were 2.5 years old, and we can get to that later, but they obviously came home with me.
Hmm.
We can go back into that. But we had to appear in court where she had to sign a document saying that she legally was abandoning her children. She
That's,
was, and we had to appear before a judge.
yeah.
I had to go before it. She had to do it. And that was painful psychologically because, I mean, she was doing this obviously as a gift. And so that idea that the only legal support for me, for my family, was that she was legally abandoning her children, which she did, but she at the same time wrote a letter that should she or I not have survived, my daughters would have seen when they were 18, explaining her motive and her support for my family, rather than what the law was labeling her. So
Yeah.
many, things change. I mean the idea of, the situation now of picking an egg and picking a host and all of that wasn't an option.
I would think it would take an awful lot of emotional maturity to be able to separate yourself from the fact that you have birthed your own children, you are actively parenting your own children, and you're grateful to have that opportunity. Now you see this person who wants to become a parent but is missing gametes and a uterus to be able to make that happen. So you step in to graciously, whether you're being paid for it or not, you're still using your body and
Mhm,
putting it
mhm,
through an awful lot of work, quite frankly, to, and that's with the singleton. And we're going to get to the fact that
mhm,
she carried two for you, um, but so then you're asked to rescind your legal rights com completely is just mind blowing because it sounds like it's barbaric,
mhm,
quite frankly.
mhm,
When truth be told, she's an angel among us who has
mhm.
gifted you with the opportunity to be able to become a parent. We should be celebrating her and not taking her in front of a judge and saying, you are rescinding your rights to this child. You don't want to have anything to do with these children. It just sounds so backwards.
No, no. Look. I think it's, the law is taking and continues to take a long time to catch up to all of it. I mean, I do think that the first two surrogates that I worked with, they in their own way may have been reckoning with some of this as well.
Sure.
That and the the not just consequences, but the all of the attendant feelings of all of that thing, particularly, and you're talking about, you know, a mother and
Hmm.
a mother and what maternal, identity comes from all of that, and knowing that, and I think that made, I mean, it's a little more dispassionate at this moment, and I think in some ways that not just is it maybe a little easier to control, but some of that stuff is just easier. I mean, I do remember when, and this is going back, when I was thinking about how to do it, and people were saying, "Oh, just ask a friend." And I thought of my friends, but I was actually really advised by, I think, a psychologist friend of mine saying, "No, don't do it with a friend. I mean, do you in a sense to keep the disentanglement a little more easy." And I think even now, people who do it with friends, it's not that it can't work and can't work extremely successfully, but it's a lot more complex because of all these emotional things,
Yeah.
all of that stuff. It's the journey. Look, it's been so interesting with my granddaughter is about to be a year old, and just watching my daughter and son-in-law, they're in uh, a cisgendered relationship, obviously, and just the journey of parenting and being a parent and what it brings out in terms of your strengths and your feelings of inadequacy and
Hmm.
how do you deal with it and what is it like to kind of help navigate the life of a newborn so all of this stuff laying on top of it does make it kind of sort of complex, much more complex.
How far along through the process was she before the two of you were advised that there were two babies in there, or because you're not doing egg donation and transfer, they're not transferring two eggs, so twins happens really just by fluke in this
Well,
case.
she because her cycle was irregular, so they had
Okay.
put her on a drug. Am I mistaken in thinking that it was Pitocin? And I think whatever the drug was, they did say it sometimes would cause two eggs. And so
Okay.
when we actually did the in-person insemination, um, the they were looking on a scan and they said, oh, there are two follicles. It could be twins. So
Okay.
actually, at the time of the insemination, they said that there was a possibility, and it was the result of this drug that caused her to sort of ovulate twice, if that's
Hmm.
how you describe it. Um, so we knew at 5 or 6 weeks when we saw the ultrasound that there were it was two eggs, and my daughters are couldn't be more different if I programmed it. They are, at 33 still at each other constantly like this because
Yeah.
personality is destiny, and it's sort of like one from column A and one from column B. They're just good friends of ours, I think when they were 2.5, who have a set of identical twins, and we were out with them, and they said, under other circumstances, your daughters never would have met. There's no way in the world that they would ever be friends.
Yeah.
But the fact that they have to deal with each other, I think, is one of the best things of their lives. That, as challenging as it sometimes is, it's also spectacular.
So you're
Um,
a gay dad and you've now got twins, and we're living in a
we even go
time
back
period.
to I was a gay couple,
Oh,
if you
right.
want
Yes.
that, and
Yes.
and and we had talked about it, and we had always said I would go first and he would go second,
Right.
um, and talk about stressors on relationships. My partner, who I at that point I've been with for 11 years,
Hmm.
but he was a little bit younger than me, but where I was having success and um, stability in my career, he was still trying to figure out his life professionally. He was a great, lovely, loving man who, um, but it had come from a very dysfunctional family of his own,
Hmm.
and it was interesting that the prospect of his becoming a parent, which he'd been supportive of in the abstract, began to scare the shit out of him,
Yeah.
um, and our relationship was foundering a bit. I mean, we were not in the best of places. And I said to him about, but our surrogate had met us as sort of the happy homosexual couple who was just going to kind of live out, some fantasy for some, certainly not fantasy for all, of having kids. Suddenly, we began to kind of question things, and so we went into couples therapy about um, 4 months, 5 months into the pregnancy, and we're in it for about 2.5 or 3 months, and then we decided we were going to split, and that was a huge thing. I mean, look, again, as I say, I see the stressors of my daughter's marriage, and I understand it,
Hmm.
and I understood it then, but this was his choice, and his choice. And the tragedy of it is he would have been an extraordinary parent, and because he was a gentle, kind, loving, um, really passionate man who just felt he didn't deserve it.
Right.
And that was sort of interesting. I think that even in my initial quest of, oh, all right, I can do this. I can have a kid. I think I bless my family for having empowered me and or given me the belief. I mean, I think a lot of gay people suffer from self-esteem issues and don't feel they're entitled to live
Mhm.
as full a life as they are entitled to live.
Right.
And I
Yes.
think, and my partner, I think, didn't feel entitled. I mean,
Hmm.
that's the other thing that when you have kids within an existing structure, there's so much to bolster you and support your journey and your journey forward and everything. When
Very
you
true.
don't have that, and particularly then,
Yes.
because there were, I don't think I knew at that time any gay people who were having kids.
Hmm.
Maybe two lesbian friends who were contemplating it. So, but there wasn't the cultural and psychological support. Every parent feels inadequate. Every parent thinks that they're not ready. Every parent wonders, what the fuck have I done? Every parent thinks, how
Yes.
can I do this? Where I find the money and patience and resolve and determination to do this.
Yeah.
And I think, and I couldn't give it to him, and I can't say we were bumping heads too. And so suddenly I was to be a single parent about a month and a half before my daughters were born. Um, but I thought, well, okay, what choice do I have at this point? What have I
Yeah.
done? But I've done this, so
Yes.
I guess I'm going forward. And by that point too, my family had come into it. There was only my mom at that time and my brother. And my mom it took her about 3 or 4 days to kind of fully understand what the fuck was going on because
Right.
it was like, what? You're what? You did what? You're having what? But once she figured it out, she became this extraordinary kind of lion of love and support and defense and it's interesting because I mean one of the things that came out of this was my having kids made me be more of an out gay man than had I not, because when I was pushing a double stroller around, people's first question was, "Oh, how great! Where's the mom?"
Yes.
Well, they don't. They have a birth mom, but
Yeah.
they're with me.
Yeah.
What do you mean they're with you? Well, I'm a gay man, and I decided I wanted to have a family.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I was immediately, I go in the supermarket, I was outing myself to whoever was coming up and admiring my twins.
Yep.
And that was a further, I mean, I think everybody says that you're constantly coming out, you're constantly having to
It's
kind of
true.
figure out who you are. And they helped me as indeed they've helped me in so many things in my life in terms of expanding and embracing things. So that's another gratitude because, but I also have to say, I mean, this is not everybody gay wants to have kids or should have
For sure.
kids or needs to have kids. I didn't do it because I needed to. It's not like I felt like, oh, my life will be completely incomplete unless I do this.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that, but I felt like I was in a position to do this.
Yeah.
Um, and the other thing is I didn't want to become as I say, I love being gay and I'm really happy about the journey of my life. But I looked around and I thought, I'm having I had a relationship and then I was single and, living a kind of lovely, I don't want to say, I don't say immature, but just where you are developmentally when you're 20 is different than where you are when you're in your mid 30s to where you are in your mid 50s. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to be you know, an aging gay man who I think sometimes they say there are two kinds of people, those who have children and those who don't. So it isn't
Hmm.
an orientation issue. But I think that when you have to kind of not put yourself first having kids,
Yes.
it changes who you are. And I didn't want to be somebody who was just so focused on me and everything about me. And I see that a little bit in older gay men who haven't pushed out on their life in some way. I mean, people get involved in different ways, you
Sure.
know, volunteerism,
Yep.
generosity of spirit, all of that stuff. There are lots of different ways to do it.
Yep.
But I knew I was never going to be off the hook with kids, as indeed at 33, I'm certainly not.
I know.
So anyway, that's another kind of, as I say, sort of great blessing that's come.
And it is. And they do teach us, as you say, to take pride in who we are because we have to out ourselves on a regular basis so that our children grow up understanding that we're not embarrassed by who we are. It's just it is who we are, and that they can, by extension, be comfortable and feel safe in understanding all of that piece. Hold on for just a moment. We'll be right back. I don't know about you, but I love being able to support queer business wherever possible. Here are 10 of the businesses I've connected with over the last couple of years. The first is Conscious Leadership Academy, and you can find them at lauriesolpizio.com, littlebondco.com, birthmarksupport.com, everydonation.com, fertilitylawcanada.com, understorycafe.com, heygaddies.com, gwkacademy.org, informedfertility.ca, and knifeyspoony.com. To learn more and visit these websites, check out the bottom of the show notes over all of the episodes in the coming weeks. As you are looking back 33, 30, even just 30 years ago, being a gay man, raising twins, in a largely populated city, which I mean, hopefully means then over time you get to meet other people whose family dynamics look like yours, or who at the very least open their arms to welcome you and your family in, as opposed to ostracizing and alienating you. I mean, what was that like? How do you navigate school systems that aren't set up for single dads, let alone single gay dads, and that kind of thing at
Yeah, it
that
was.
time?
I mean, again, the good news is that Los Angeles, as a big city in a big blue liberal state,
Right.
although 20 miles from here, I could be stoned. I mean,
Sure.
um, but one was able to. I mean, then, your priority shift because then you've got to you ground your kids and find out how they're going to be educated and find who's going to be supportive and loving. I mean, I had the love of my family,
Mhm.
although that was distant. They were all in Canada. We had and one of the things that I'm very good at as a film director is I'm very good at casting, and so I knew I had to find somebody. I was gonna need to find a nanny,
Mhm.
somebody, and who was more than just a paid employee. It was going to have to be somebody who was gonna, understand and embrace the situation, be supportive of the situation, be a kind of a really powerful adjunct to me
Mhm.
in terms of the situation. And I thought, so initially it was like, do I hire a twins nanny or I mean, this is Hollywood, and there were people suggesting, oh, so and so parent, so I had famous people's nannies, and at one point, and again, I used some of the same newspapers that I looked for surrogates in Washington State. I advertised for small town nannies, and when I was shooting in Vancouver, I would go south and meet people, and um, so finding the right person was there, and it was not, it started really from, when the viability of the pregnancy. So I was looking from when they were 4 months old right up until whatever. And somebody said to me, "Oh, you're Jewish. There's this large Russian Jewish population in Los Angeles. You should maybe look for, a Mother Russia kind of bear." And then I spoke to somebody else who worked with the Jewish Federation who said, the last person in the world you want is one of these women, because they don't want to be staff, they want to have staff. And that
Right.
person said to me, you really should look, you're in Southern California, you should really look in the Latino community because, children and the miracle of having children is so much bigger in
Mhm.
for Latin community. And I went, I think it was about I did almost three movies back to back before my kids were born so that I could take a good chunk of time off once they were born.
Mhm.
And one of the films was shooting in Mexico City, and I can remember going out on a Sunday and seeing all these families. They were like, all the kids were dressed to the nines, and they were kind of like little ducklings following their parents to church and following their parents back. And where you realize that, and there are certain communities that for whom children is more than just
Mhm.
that the miracle of what it is and the responsibility of what it is and the adoration of family life is what it is. So I started looking in the Latina community and met an extraordinary woman who was from El Salvador, had raised her own son, had to leave him and then brought him to America when she'd come. And we met, and again, as I say, and I just had the instinct and that's what I'm saying, it's casting. I felt like this was the person. And so I engaged her, and my daughters were born in Northern California in the hospital where the birth mom was connected to. And then at 3 days old, the birth mom and I traveled south with the two babies, and we met Emelina, who is our nanny. And she was with us, lived with us for like 14 years.
Oh,
And was and is still a really strong, you know, female continuity in their lives. I mean, she was Catholic, but had a great respect for religion and good works and is extremely selfless. And so we did all kinds of things with them. Um, and so that was one piece of the continuity. The other was the question of schools. Um, I had I had a set of friends she was Long Island Jewish and she was married to a man who had a very famous couple of Thai restaurants. So he was Thai and she was Long Island Jewish, and they had two daughters, Asia and China. And they had gotten involved with a Reform Jewish temple. And I had been raised Jewish and had a bar mitzvah, but then had sort of really had not a lot to do with religion from when I moved to England to when I kind of came back. And I really never thought about it a lot. But then I thought, well, I'd like my kids to have a moral code taught to them and a continuity to them. And this couple suggested I check out this temple. And so we went there, and it was I mean, Jews like kids too. Not just as, but it was very child-centric, their preschool, and really supportive. And I felt very much like an insider. In fact, I checked out a gay Jewish temple, but there were no children there. And so that was not going to be a fit because they just didn't know their way around it. And I needed to be in a place where they got it, and they got it in
yeah.
spades and extraordinary people. And it's interesting. My son-in-law is Irish Catholic. They met when my daughter was studying medicine in Ireland, but my daughter and son-in-law chose to put my granddaughter, because they're both back working now, into a temple preschool and I think or daycare a couple of days a week. And it's just a real warm, friendly, non-judgmental, supportive, everything
Nice.
that you want. That's what you want. I mean, you can find
Sure.
it anywhere. I mean, that's where we found it. So that became their preschool. And then um, Los Angeles has a very confusing and in some ways dysfunctional public education system. Canada is so blessed to have a thriving. I know it's not as good as it was, but I got a great education through
Hmm.
Canadian schools,
Hmm.
and I see my nephews and nieces getting great education still. I know it's harder. I know
Yeah.
but LA, the local high school we were living, 40% of the kids say that they were somehow connected to gangs, and so it was not a supportive environment to learn. And so I began to look around, and there are a number of, and I have very mixed feelings about private schools because I think there's an elitism that comes in it, and I didn't want that. But
Yeah.
we applied for it, and then were subsequently pursued by the toughest kind of junior school to get into in LA. People kind of want to throw money at it. But because I was a single gay man with twins, they did have other, at that point, gay couples, but they had gay couples with a singleton, and I was a singleton with twins. They kind of pursued me because they liked the idea of including us in their sort of rainbow demographic. The school was run by a very capable African American woman who was the principal for a long time, and it was very heterogeneous in terms of the rich people paid for the school, but they did a lot of scholarships. Brought a lot of African Americans in, multiculturalism stuff, and they wanted a gay presence as part of it. It's interesting now if you're, I mean, you can only get into the school maybe if you're mixed race and have special needs kids. It's gotten that much. 30
Yeah.
years
Yeah.
ago, it wasn't as hard even as to get in now. But so that it was always I needed to find places where not just where I felt at home, but where my kids weren't going to be, in any way traumatized or stigmatized. I mean, they did get questions, because people say, "Well, where's your mom?"
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
they say, well, we don't have a mom. We have our dad, and we have Emelina. Um, and I know, but I also sort of armed them with the truth was that your dad wasn't going to have kids, but he found somebody who was going to fulfill his wish and dream. And so they're here by the blessing of so many people. And
Hmm.
you're here because you're loved and you're here because you're wanted. And ultimately that. And so, and the school was a great environment. We continued the relationship with the temple. They went there for Sunday school, and then they had bat mitzvahs there, and then they were confirmed. And it was all about creating situations that are going to be loving and supportive and in so much of the country still and with the rollbacks and hideous stuff of what's been going on in this country in terms of I was involved for 4 years um as a phone coach on for the Trevor Project, which is a gay suicide line.
Yep.
And Trevor and I took phone calls, 3 or 4 hours a week. And they were all kids from red states. They were all kids who were gay, many of them trans, who had non-comprehending families and non-supportive environments in a lot of these red states and all of this legislation and prejudice that they're having to deal with. And was leading these kids to consider suicide or just live with high levels of stress and anxiety because there was no acceptance. That became a real priority for me with my kids. They needed to be in safe, supportive places and a safe, supportive home too, obviously.
And then by witnessing you have that feeling, have that approach, have that expectation in life that your children are going to see this and witness this and you're going to do what you can, that helps them to build their own empathy and compassion for the world around them too, right? I mean, we want to lead, for example, with our children and teach them the goodness, the kindness of others.
Indeed, indeed. And we again with the temple, we were involved in all kinds of you know, we would do something called Big Sunday. We would do social causes. We would build libraries in schools. We would take, and that was something that Emelina, through her Catholic church, and we did stuff with her church as well, doing good deeds.
Yeah.
She still every week goes and visits prisoners in jail and does it. So that's sort of in her blood. And hopefully, and really, my daughters have done. I mean, one of my daughters is a doctor. She works in clinical trials in oncology. She's the one with the baby. And my other daughter is trained as an emergency room nurse, and she's now working with a big medical scan company. And they're both natural caregivers. As I said, they bump heads like crazy, but they're really at one in and around my granddaughter, and to some degree, my granddaughter has made their relationship better because when they're together, they can be focused on that, and they both instinctively know what to do in ways that delights me and surprises me and makes me extremely happy. So they continue to kind of figure that out in their own way, and that's a huge sort of joy too. I have had and I'm having an extremely blessed and full life, and it all tracks back to that one decision. I mean, you know, career has been kind to me. I now teach a lot and work with, and I enjoy working with sort of young people in their early 20s as they're beginning to figure out their own thing, and that's a continuing joy. So I get to apply my parenting gene, I guess, there as well.
Sure.
But that gives me joy, the friends of my life, and the other thing that happened, and I'm sure this happened was when even very young, is that my friends, you end up making friends with other parents, right? You make
Yes.
friends with, I mean, and that becomes a celebrity because, and initially people would say, "Oh, I know somebody who's gay as a kid," and then I would meet them, and I think somehow we become friends with people who parent similarly or who
Yes.
kind of embrace the world and the world of their children similarly, as opposed to just the gay thing. I mean,
Yes.
yeah, I've reflected on a lot. I mean, and obviously different for gay women maybe than gay men. It was. I mean, and I've led a slightly kind of singular life, but I've never won. I mean, my desire to parent was not to kind of be like everybody else.
Mhm.
And that was, and so convention has never interested me, and it doesn't really interest me in a gay situation either, in terms of all that, if that makes sense. That
Makes a lot of sense.
um, so yeah, the people who and yeah, some of my best friends are people I've known for 30 years who I met through parenting groups because when you start out with your kids, you have to go to the play date, right? So
Yes.
you're stuck there with the
Yes.
parents and you're thinking, and it's so interesting to watch my daughter and son-in-law going through this. Like my daughter um, going through postpartum groups and meeting young kids, and now meeting kids and parents of kids in their daycare and who they're doing it. And they found a couple who they liked a lot, and they liked the kid a lot. And then after the second kind of outing with her, my daughter said, I don't think they're big into vaccines, so I don't feel like we can continue this friendship because I mean, she's a doctor, right? So she
Hmm.
has no tolerance, and she's a little intolerant anyway of stupidity and bad faith. So there's no why she said I just can't think about putting Charlie, who's my granddaughter, in any. I mean, she's you know people who are not embracing that philosophically or obviously medically. So yeah, I think that we find people through that and I'm grateful for those friendships and friendships that I obviously never would have had, people that I never would have known, people I never would have come, but for them. So in that way, again, I think on the scoreboard, I think I did better than my daughters in the sweepstakes.
There you go. So, so keeping that piece in mind, as we get ready to wrap up, can you tell me, looking back over your experience of being a parent to these two beautiful humans, what has been your very, very favorite part of the whole process, the whole journey?
It's it's just being with them,
Hmm.
I mean, the great joy is every milestone, every birthday, walking my daughter down the aisle, being in the delivery room and pushing with my son-in-law and my daughter. The three of us were kind of all there in the birth. I mean I mean, unforgettable moments like that.
Hmm.
We're literally planning Charlie's first birthday now, which is next month. Seeing my granddaughter on FaceTime. I mean, they live in San Diego. We do see each other quite a lot, but I see her every day, and so I'll see her when she's eating. She's now eating solids and stuff like that. My life is so blessed by so much richness,
Hmm.
I mean, again, I keep saying I've had such a charmed and privileged life. I've had great success professionally. I've won awards. I've done a mini series in Russia, made a movie in Japan, and shot a movie in South Africa, and shot in Norway, and shot all over the States, and shot all over Canada. And you know, directed Bradley Cooper's first comedy and worked with a ton of A and A minus and B-list stars. And all that's been joyful and fun and interesting. And I'm a big part of the process. I mean, life is process, and my filmmaking and my parenting is process. It's just every day,
Hmm.
it's something else. And how it's not always fun, but it's always extraordinary.
Yeah.
And so I have to say that's been a great bedrock, but certainly, lighting Hanukkah candles with them or, just, yeah, seeing Charlie's learned to wave at me. So, I mean,
Oh,
that makes me as high as anything else.
I love that.
So,
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. And it's amazing to be able to witness it now in the next generation. That's pretty
mhm.
cool. That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
it really is. Yeah. Yeah, grandparenting is pretty extraordinary because you can be there when you want to be, you can be when you have to be, you can spoil them like crazy, and you can all say, I gotta go, sorry, it's on you. I know you haven't slept for 5 days, and I'm sorry. She brought home a bug from daycare and she had it for about 2.2 hours, and you had it for about 2.2 weeks, and you're still
Oh,
suffering.
it's so true. It's so true. Oh my gosh. And I'm closer to that part of my life, but I'm not there yet. Not there yet. I want to take a moment, just thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and so that my listeners can hear your story. And it really gives us a piece of an idea of how the world has evolved. Because I think sometimes we spend so much time thinking about how far we still have yet to go.
Mhm,
We need
mhm.
to pause and remember how far we've come. And you've given us that opportunity. Thank you.
Good. Well, everybody keep going.
Absolutely. As a queer individual with colonial lineage, I want to first acknowledge the land upon which I live and work. Being from what is now known as Burlington, Ontario, I recognize the original ancestry of these lands as they span from Lake Ontario to the Niagara Escarpment and beyond. These lands are steeped in Indigenous history that benefits my community every day. The territory is mutually covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy, the Ojibwe, and other allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which I stand is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. The land dictates everything about our ways of being. Particularly, the land teaches us about fluidity. Concepts of the binary system and heteropatriarchy were imposed by the colonials who were, at the same time, removing children from their homes, families, and all that was familiar to them. These same children were divided by the only two prescribed binaries recognized by the settlers, and they were forced to conform to a performative, gendered falsehood. The land doesn't operate under binary thinking. It is diverse, complex, and unpredictable at times. Rather, the land holds us and all of our remarkable pasts and identities. Every organism and spirit has a purpose. It is from this understanding that I strive to live and grow. Thank you for joining me today on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast. If you have a story that you'd like to share, or you know someone who might, if you're a professional who works in the capacity of helping people start and grow their families, and you identify as being a part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community yourself, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We always have room for more stories to share, and there's always more learning to do.